أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. A great pleasure it is to be here again with you, this warm, loving atmosphere. And again, I start with a prayer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that inshallah we're all able to walk away from this workshop with some benefit. It's great for us to be able to try and develop our understanding here, but the most important thing is that there's some change in our action, that there's some change in our amal. I'm continuing today from a workshop that we held last week, some familiar faces. And so those of you who weren't here last week, I'll be doing a brief recap to start off with on some of the themes that we discussed. And then inshallah building on that by looking at a number of other mental health difficulties and continuing to build on the theme of what we can do to be more mentally healthy and how this is particularly relevant for us as Shia Ishnasri Muslims because it's relevant to our spirituality and our spiritual growth. So if I can just start off with the first slide just to continue this overview. Building on last time, we'll look at what are the other most common mental health difficulties for us to be aware of and what can we do to address those, and indeed what we discussed last time when we were looking particularly at low mood and depression. We'll look further then at when do we recognize that maybe we need to reach out. We talked last time about not being burdened with any difficulty that we can't carry, but that the blessings that allow us to deal with that burden aren't just located within us, sometimes they're around us. So when is it we need to reach out further beyond ourselves? Also look at the area of medication, which particularly in the West and increasingly around the world is seen as the number one option. So we'll look at some of the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages in medication. And then finally, I'd really like to draw on you and your wisdom, your resources, your perspectives on what is it we can do to be a more mentally healthy community. So last time I was particularly enamored by your contributions. This isn't just a monologue, this isn't just me speaking to you, this is about us working together. And I come here as much as anything to benefit from you, inshallah, in response to how you might be able to benefit from me. So, let's do a quick recap. Last time, if I just hit the next one, we talked about what is mental health. We drew a parallel with physical health, knowing that when you're physically healthy, a lot of what you're experiencing physically is going well, and that affects how you feel mentally, affects how you feel spiritually. But it's not that you're just healthy or you're not healthy. There's lots of bits in between. And similarly with our mental health, we might be feeling very healthy, or we can feel really terrible, and actually we slide between. There's lots of situations, circumstances in life that draw us to various stages of being mentally healthy or even unhealthy. We really focused last time on this area of depression. And we tried to understand what is depression. We drew a distinction between disappointment, sadness, that everyday experience that most of us have, but recognize that there are some more intense symptoms. Physical, in terms of feeling tired, the way it affects our appetite and our sleep, our motivation, how easy things feel, how difficult things can feel. And particularly, and I'll come back to this at the end of our analysis of other mental health conditions, is when it starts affecting our ability to function. My ability to socialize with my friends and family, my ability to get to work, my ability to look after myself. Just doing those everyday things at home, like cleaning, cooking, etc. We then had an interesting discussion on, can a Muslim with strong iman, can they get depressed? And here lies an important part which hopefully will continue to elaborate on at the end of today's session on judgment. And why was it we might judge someone for being depressed? You're a Muslim, how can you be depressed? You should have strong iman. But actually, is the challenge that we might experience in terms of our mental health something we always have a choice about? Is it maybe conceivable that this could be part of the test? And we talked about how those that are closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those who He loves, actually being subject to different tests. Similarly to physical conditions. Can you have strong iman and still get cancer? Yeah, of course you can. This isn't something that we have a choice. And if it's not something we have a choice, then should we be judging? We went on to talk about what might be able to help. And I kind of talked about balance. Balance being a key theme in our faith. That middle path, moderation. And just seeing how sometimes when we're feeling really down, the emphasis can be much more on what you should be doing, what you should be achieving, getting better grades, making sure you're there at work, making sure you're providing for your family. But if we're just focusing on that, then are we being balanced in terms of what we're doing? How is it we might need to make sure we have time allocated to connect with each other as human beings? Just recapping a little bit on that and asking you to reflect. Even when you're at work, even when you're at home, surely you're connecting with people. Or are you? So sometimes we can get into a mode where, you know, I'm making your bed for you, I'm doing the dinner for you, I'm putting food on the table for you. But that's just functional. Where's the connection? How many of us, when we come home from a stressful day at work or having been home doing stressful tasks at home, actually engage with each other, actually ask each other, how are we doing? It just makes me think a little bit of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And his mission being around perfecting our akhlaq. That isn't just about putting food on the table. That isn't just about putting a roof over the head. That's not the limits of akhlaq. It's about the smile you give to your family members, your friends. So our connection. So we had this acronym ACE, achievement, connection, and enjoyment. That this world is here for us to enjoy within the confines of our circumstances, and making sure we allow ourselves to make use of those blessings, to give ourselves the opportunity to have that little bit of balance in our life. We talked about the balance physically as well, in terms of making sure we get enough sleep. But if it's difficult to sleep, there are a number of reasons why it might be difficult to sleep. But two of the factors that we know are definitely related to that is our exercise and our diet. Are we just eating rubbish? We know we have to eat from a halal means, but that's just the start. Are we eating healthy? How does that influence the energy we have? How does the energy we have influence our exercise? As Muslims, how much are we known around the world, in our society, in our own communities, for our exercise, our physical prowess? Is this, are we living to the standards that we would aspire to, that the Ahlul Bayt would be proud of? So all of these things physically very much linked in with us emotionally, with us spiritually. We talked also about purpose, and I shared the story of Viktor Frankl, which I won't go into detail again. For those who are interested, please read Man's Search for Meaning, a phenomenal book, which really I concluded with two key points. That one, no matter how difficult your circumstances, your ability to see beyond that. What is your purpose? You weren't born to be in a certain place by accident. That's not our ideology. That's a different ideology. And if we were born in a certain place at a certain time, in certain circumstances, there must be a reason. Do we reflect What's the wisdom of that to help us identify our purpose? I'm wondering, does anyone here feel that they can identify with a particular purpose for why they're here? Or maybe in your life, what is it you want to achieve with your life? Does anyone know what the Quran says about our purpose? Why we were created?
It's Allah created mankind and jinn to worship Him.
To worship Him. So what do we understand by worship? Reading the Quran? Making dua? Sitting on the prayer mat? So our purpose must extend beyond that. Those are essential parts of our being, to worship our Creator. But does the worship of our Creator take into account something more? Who are the best examples for understanding purpose, for understanding how we worship our Creator? Ahlul Bayt. Yeah. Now, indeed, they engage deeply in prayer, in ritual prayer, as we understand it and practice it. But that wasn't the limitation of how they serve their Creator. And I would want to put to you that one of the best ways in which we can serve our Creator is to serve His creation. So we'll come back onto that in a moment. I really would ask you that if you want to get something out of this, if you want to leave today with something a little bit different that could start having an impact on your life, is to be clear about what your purpose is. Yeah? Now that can be a journey that might take you months or even years, and that's fine. But if you were to die in the search of your purpose, you're dying with a cause. As an example, I'll just share with you one of what I feel my purpose is, and I kind of have it in a statement. Sarfraz Jeraj was born to be the spark that ignited the release of potential in his fellow human beings. If you look at major corporations, they have a vision statement. Now, what's to stop us having a vision statement? A lot of corporations, underlying their vision statement is profit. Understandable, that's their function. But for us, what's our function? When you die, what do you want people to remember you for? This isn't about our ego, this is about our purpose. Now, one of the means, and I do a little bit of corporate consultancy, one of the ways in which a corporation identifies its vision statement is to think about its resources, about its unique selling points. And if we were to apply that to ourselves, what are our resources? What are our unique selling points? And I guess framing it from an Islamic point of view, we might think of our blessings. So we're going to start this, just start it off and inshallah continue it in your own time. But can I ask everyone to pull out their phones? And I want you to open your notes section. And I want you to write down at least 3 of the biggest blessings that you have. Now, oxygen, although it's a blessing, that doesn't really count. I want you to think about something that's more unique to you. Something that maybe other people have noticed about you. If you were gone tomorrow, that people would miss about you. Yeah, we're up to 2 here. You could definitely do more than 3. And my invitation to you is not like a homework or anything, but this is about your own growth and development. Is, are you going to continue writing this down? Because the more you become aware of your blessings, the clearer your purpose will become to you. What is it I've been blessed with? Because on the day of judgment, I'm going to be raised. We're all going to be raised, and we're going to be asked a question. What did you do with your blessings? Did I just get caught up in the rat race? Or did I use it to help me understand and reflect on why am I here in 2018? Why am I here in London? Why am I in the family that I'm in? Why am I in the community and the society that I'm in? That gives me an indication of my purpose. If you think about the people in history who've really made a difference, the one thing they all have in common is that they were aware of their purpose. It didn't just happen by accident. Sometimes you might fall into a situation without intending to, but when you're in that situation, it's knowledge of your purpose that allows you to fulfill your potential, so that you can stand up on the day of judgment and say, Ya Allah, this is what I've done with what you gave me blessings with. I want to put Hussein on the spot here. Hussein, can you share your blessings?
One of them.
At least 2.
Okay. The only 2 that I have. Okay. The only one would be being the only son to my parents, which makes their well-being and their well-being my responsibility and mine alone, being the only son. And the second thing would be my ability to serve the Ahlul Bayt. The opportunity to serve the Ahlul Bayt would be a better one.
Thank you. Now, if I can just borrow on that second one, my ability to serve the Ahlul Bayt, that's really broad. My invitation would be to try and spend some time refining what it is. Now, doing it for yourself can be a little bit more challenging. So, speak to someone that knows you. Speak to someone that loves you, and help them get you to break it down. So, I'm not incredibly close to Hussein, but the proximity I do have to him, the experience I have had with him, is that he's a great people person. He puts people at ease, he's supportive, and he's caring. So these are things that he hasn't just decided he's going to be. These are the things he's been blessed with. These are the things that are part of his fitrah. And that may help guide him. And you may already see, for those of you who know him, how he links that to his purpose. So, inshallah, that's something you might carry on. Is anyone aware of any hadith or anything that tells us about how many blessings we have?
There's a hadith that says that we would never ever be able to pay back the blessing of having a mother who carried us in their wombs, basically.
Yeah. So just that alone is such a huge blessing. There's also another hadith that says that if you took all the oceans and turned them into ink, and all the trees and turned them into pens, you still wouldn't be able to enumerate how many blessings you have. Yeah. So that's, if you only got to 3, then inshallah, you know there's a lot more reflection to do. Yeah. Anyone care to share any thoughts on what their unique blessings might be, or what their purpose might be?
It's so simple, just the fact that I'm breathing right now, because he does see this up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And my invitation is, go deeper than that. Go deeper into your specific blessings, because they're the ones that will guide your purpose. Okay. There's one other point from the Viktor Frankl story, which was about choice. And we linked it to Imam Hussein, alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And that was choice. that in the face of innumerable obstacles, the one thing that we always have is choice. Now, those choices might not always be huge, they might not be absolute and complete, but we do have choice. And like I said, even in the worst case scenario, even as you walk towards a certain death, you still have the choice about whether you hold your head up high in dignity or down in shame. Yeah. So, if we can hit the next slide. Let's move on to talking about what the other common mental health problems are. But just before we do that, just a quick overview of how do we even define or understand what a mental health problem is. So I guess the most popular way of doing this is by a system called diagnosis. Diagnosis is really a cluster of different symptoms. So what is it I'm experiencing physically? What is it I'm experiencing mentally? How long am I experiencing these things for? What effect is it having? And when there's certain patterns of different symptoms and difficulties coming together, then we identify that as a diagnosis. Now, this can be helpful sometimes because it helps us give a name to something. It helps us research something. It helps us focus on what do we do about this. It can sometimes be unhelpful because it starts labeling people. Yeah? And labeling can have its pros and cons. I mean, if we think about labels we have here, it can be really helpful to label our communities. So we might have an Iraqi community, we might have an Iranian community, and these things give us an identity. But they can be misused as well. And if we use them as ways of dividing, as ways of kind of putting superiority or inferiority, then that's a misuse of a label. So it happens in our nationalistic identities. It can happen in mental health diagnoses as well. So again, the invitation and the implication for us as a community is just being aware, being able to recognize that someone may be struggling, that we may be struggling ourselves sometimes, to be able to give it a name so we can do something about it, but not giving it a name so that we can judge anyone else or even judge ourselves. So, top, most common, most frequent mental health difficulties, anxiety. People familiar with anxiety? Yeah. Just to kind of help me, what in different languages, what words might we have for anxiety? I know people here speak more than just English. Worry? So more than English. So in other languages, what would you say? Yeah. Yeah. In another language? Khawf? Yeah. Any other languages? In Farsi as well. So how do I pronounce that? N-A-Z. T-Z. We need to get a mic round here, please. Let me just... See, we can't be missing out on these valuable contributions. Thank you very much, sister. Tars. Thank you. So the reason I'm just exploring whether we have other names for this is just to kind of maybe demystify whether is this just some culturally constructed thing or is this something more universal to all humans? And all humans worry. And we have it's represented in different languages, different cultures, different ideologies. I think last week I might have mentioned that all emotions have a function. And the function of anxiety, which is linked to threat, is to protect ourselves. As you walk out across Golders Green High Street, there's a big bus coming towards you. If you didn't get anxious, if you didn't detect that threat, well, you're not going to be able to move in time. So it helps you survive. But we experience different types of threat. There's a physical threat, but what other threats might we as humans experience? Mental threats. So give me an example.
Or you're only thinking of something. For example, you have a test next day.
Exactly. So the test and the fear of the outcome might be a threat. So maybe with a bus, it's a threat to my physical integrity, my physical safety. But with a test, It might be a threat to my kind of pride. It might be a threat to my future ambition. It might be a threat to how I'm evaluated by society or by myself. Verbal threat. Islamophobia. Yeah. So someone doing physical harm to you again, but someone just doing emotional harm to you. Yeah. You could, if you tried, just close your eyes and think back to a time where you were under some sort of threat. Maybe it's a social threat, the threat of being embarrassed in front of other people. So we have a range of different perceptions of threat, and our bodies respond. Our bodies respond by trying to prepare us to deal with the threat. So again, I'm going to use you as a guinea pig here. No, you stay here. Okay, this guy's hardcore, yeah? Most people would be like, move away, yeah? It's a natural response to threat. Now, our conventional, we have sort of three key responses to threat. One is to get away from it, to protect ourselves. Two is to fight it, so it doesn't get the better of us. And three, sometimes, is just to freeze. Just don't know what to do, just act like nothing's happening, yeah? So these are all responses to anxiety, and we all do them all the time. We all need to have a certain level of anxiety that's quite healthy. Otherwise, it's as if we're asleep. It's when that anxiety gets too much, when it starts getting us to run away from every situation, or freeze, or fight in every situation, as may be the case sometimes in anger, that it goes beyond what's helpful for us. And maybe if we think about the different aspects of our soul, and acknowledging how we're created with the desires of the animals, but the intellect, the kind of mind that we have of the angels, it's where are we drawing the balance? How are we using our wisdom to help manage our desires, those automatic inbuilt survival responses, so that it stays in a balance? And so you have people that sometimes go beyond what's helpful for them and experience anxiety. We talked about depression, so the second most common. Phobias. So let me give you a few examples of phobias. Flying phobia, spider phobia, dog phobia. Hands up here if you've got a phobia. Yeah. So actually, the vast majority of people have some kind of phobia or other. Normally, it doesn't matter so much, but for some people, that phobia starts affecting their life. So, for example, vomit phobia. I work with a number of people who have phobias, and sometimes vomit phobia, depending on the role you have, can really get in the way. So, a while ago, I was working with a lady who, because of her fear of vomit, her avoidance of vomit, she was a teacher. And when you're a teacher, you have to deal with children. And children sometimes puke. So it was affecting her job. She was married and she wanted to be a mother. But her fear of, if I have a baby, the baby's going to puke. And I'm going to have to deal with that. So that was affecting her family life. Yeah. So a number of phobias, it's quite normal for us all to have them, but they can sometimes get to a level where they affect your ability to function. OCD. Anyone heard of OCD? Yeah. This term's used really colloquially and often inappropriately in a way that can be quite judgmental. So I know, like in my masjid, it bugged me that all the shoes were all over the place, so I'd try and put them neatly. And people were like, stop being so OCD, man. That wasn't OCD. That was just kind of a bit of my personality trait. But like I said, for mental health, it's on a continuum. When it goes too extreme, when it starts getting in the way, when we start becoming distressed by it, then actually it's a bit more of a problem. That's when we might say that something is more OCD. Something that's particular to the Muslim community is OCD around cleanliness. The emphasis that we have in our faith on tahara, on purity, also needs to be done with balance. If I've done my wudu, then I need to be careful that I don't get any waswas about doubt. Did you do it properly? Okay, I'm not sure. I better do it again. But did you miss a bit? I better. And actually then what I've done is salah time is gone. And I'm still engrossed in that. What about the kuffar? Surely they're najis, they're dirty. Now of course we have our fiqh that speaks to that helps us draw helpful guidelines. But when we overstep that, when it becomes more extreme, then it can impact us in a way where actually I can't even get on the bus, because what if I come into contact with someone? I can't go to work, I can't have relationships, I can't integrate with my wider community. And a lot of these things have their initial seeds at a very basic level. So I guess as a community we need to think about how are we putting forward that message? How strict and rigid are we being? And are we getting the balance right in terms of being faithful to what our religion requires? And where are we maybe overstepping that in a way that now is restricting us from actually fulfilling our potential? There's different types of OCD, often around cleanliness and tahara, but fundamentally OCD starts off with that little whisper, that intrusive thought that we now attach a significant meaning to. We all have intrusive thoughts. Yeah. Now why we have them and where they come from maybe doesn't matter so much. The fact is we all have them. Yeah. Sometimes they're good thoughts, intentions. I really want to do something good for this person. Yeah. I didn't mean to have that thought, it just came into my head. Sometimes we can have a thought about, I just really want to push his head. Wouldn't it be funny if I just tipped his glasses off or something? But that thought is just a thought. I can let it come and I can let it go, and I don't have to pay any attention to it. If I now start judging myself, why did I have that thought? Is there something wrong with me? That's where I start falling into OCD. And its manifestation is often in these compulsive behaviors that we have to do again and again and again. Again, an aspect of this which is particular to Muslims is how we cope with these thoughts. And sometimes you can do things that help you cope, that are really good for you in the short and the long term, but sometimes we do things that are quite unhelpful in the long term. And one example is prayer. Can you pray too much? No? Absolutely. If I'm responding to an intrusive thought that really doesn't have any significance, but I'm attaching more weight to it than is necessary, and I cope with it by just praying all the time, then actually I'm not going out earning for my family, I'm not feeding my family, I'm not studying, I'm not doing those other things. Again, it's gone out of balance. So, I just want to make it very clear, I'm not advocating that people shouldn't pray. Of course we should pray, and that's an essential part of our faith, and of course there are incredible benefits to it. However, we shouldn't be praying to the exclusion of our other responsibilities. Panic, another very common mental health difficulty. Now, okay, so I saw a couple of people jump. Yeah, now that's a normal reaction. Yeah, there's something going on. Ooh, we respond. We don't even control that. It happens on an automatic level, and often there are automatic things happening inside our bodies the whole time. Yeah, you're not choosing to make your heart breathe. Your heart beat. You're not choosing to make your lungs breathe. Yeah, these are happening by a blessing. That part of the brain that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for us that takes care of it automatically. So there's often automatic things going on in our head. But sometimes in our bodies, we notice things, and again, it's how we're making sense of them. And in panic, it's often, my heart's beating. What does that mean? That's really worrying. The threat. And it can escalate to a point where I think I'm going to have a heart attack. Can I just get you to do a quick experiment? Can you swallow 5 times? After 3, 1, 2, 3. It's hard to get to 5. Yeah. Now, what does that mean? I'm feeling my throat's getting really dry. I'm not swallowing properly. Now, that natural sensation is something I can start worrying about. What does that mean? Does that mean I'm going to choke? I won't be able to breathe? That's panic. Yeah? It can be related to the way we think. Let's do another quick experiment. Put your hand out in front of you and just stare at it for about 20 seconds. Okay, I think 10 seconds is enough. By focusing our attention on certain things in a certain way, can now start making us feel, hang on, is that really my hand? Does that feels a bit weird? Yeah, I don't know, did anyone get that a little bit? Or was it just me? Yeah, okay. So there's something about our perception. Now, if I'm really worried about it, what I might end up doing is I might stare at it for even longer. But staring at it for even longer starts making it feel even more weird. Now, if I start worrying about how that's feeling, it could escalate. It goes over the limit, and I start having concerns about, am I losing my mind? Again, panic. So panic is really about our perception of our own physical symptoms, about our own experience, that goes beyond a certain limit, that starts feeling really threatening and dangerous, and then we cope with it by just hiding, by running away, by not doing it, by trying to push it out of our minds. And this is another thing that's common to a lot of these kind of difficulties, is how we cope, trying to push it out of our minds. But pushing out of our minds doesn't always help. So let's do one last experiment before we move on. So as I was making my way here, it was a really interesting experience. There's a guy who was walking his dog, but his dog was painted like a luminous green. Yeah. So just imagine that, this really quite cute dog, but it's a luminous green. Yeah, really striking image. Now, for the next 10 seconds, I want you to make sure that you do not think about this luminous green dog. Don't think about it. Don't think about the luminous green dog. Okay, 10 seconds. How many of you did not think about the luminous green dog? You were cheating. Yeah. So the point here is that sometimes our strategies, although we have a good intention, they're trying to achieve something, actually don't help. And with all of these things, it's when we're using strategies that try to help ourselves, but aren't working. So again, I bring us back to judgment, that people don't want to experience this distress. They want to get out of it. And we can't judge them for suffering. Even though it might be simple and straightforward to us, people are struggling in their own rights. And that's why seeking help can be really beneficial. So I'll just go over some of the other sometimes considered more severe and enduring mental health difficulties. So you've got bipolar disorder, and that's really when people go into a really deep depression, but then don't just get back up to a normal phase, then shoot off the other end. Become super happy, super excited, almost feel like they're invincible, like nothing can stop them, start acting in ways where they're taking serious risks because they think they're so amazing, or the situation's so amazing. And it's that constant, it's that flux. For some people it happens every couple of weeks, it might happen every couple of months, but that's what we consider as bipolar disorder. We've got schizophrenia. Anyone heard of schizophrenia? Yeah. Now, it is a slightly debatable diagnosis, but often some of the symptoms that people report are sort of not related to reality. So, for example, feeling that you've got special powers, imagining, seeing things that aren't really there, hearing things that aren't really there. Now, we all hear things, but it's what we ascribe them to. Is it just your own voice in your head, or actually is it a voice that's saying something to you, that you can identify that's separate from you? Paranoia, feeling that you're being watched, if someone's out to get you, without having any real substantive evidence to support that. So a different state of reality, and that's another condition. Autism. Again, this is along a spectrum. We could argue that we're all somewhere along this continuum of autism, a developmental disorder. And I'm just highlighting these. I don't think we've got enough time to go into detail for all of them. ADHD, again, another controversial kind of diagnosis, when it's very difficult to pay attention. On the move the whole time, can't focus on one thing. And particularly diagnosed in children compared to adults. Eating disorders, focused around either eating too much and then expelling it, using laxatives or throwing up, in some desire to kind of control your weight or your shape, your image. PTSD. So this is a condition where people have experienced a traumatic event, say for example seeing someone being murdered, or even being in an accident, something like that themselves, feeling like they were this close to death. And then that memory doesn't get processed. It keeps coming back in flashbacks. Even at night time, it will keep coming back as nightmares. And every time it comes back, it's not like an ordinary memory. It feels as if that's happening again. So if you thought you were going to die in the actual traumatic event, it actually feels like you're going to die every time you remember it. And it can be triggered off by so many different things. And substance abuse. And increasingly with substance abuse as an addiction, as a mental health problem, you've got two other key areas which are very underplayed. Gambling, as well as the drugs and alcohol that this refers to, and pornography. And these are things that find their ways into our communities. But not talking about them just allows them to fester, allows them to grow. And I hope, inshallah, as a community, we develop the maturity to tackle these things, to use our wisdom from our faith, but also to be non-judgmental. See, it's up here as a mental health problem, because although often it starts with a choice that someone makes, when you're addicted, it's not as straightforward as a choice. If it was a choice, people would just stop. But I think that's another common mental health problem for us to be aware of. I've got a few stats here. I think in order for us to make best use of the remaining time, I'm just going to skip this next two slides. So let's move on to what we can do to be mentally healthier. Next slide. So this has been a long part of our faith tradition. And it's something that Western psychology is only stumbling onto now. But it's great, because if it gives more emphasis to this noble act, then hopefully it encourages more of us to get involved. Often when we do something for someone else, the biggest beneficiary isn't them, it's us. In terms of our mental health, when we are struggling with difficulties, the focus is so much on me, on my distress. And of course it would be, because I'm the one that's suffering. But increasingly what we find from research, from trials, is that when I do something from someone else, it takes some of the focus off me. If my focus on myself is just distress-based, then that just locks me into a vicious cycle. If I can do something positive for someone else, it shifts that focus. Not saying that all the problems are going to be solved, but this can be one helpful step. And in doing so, I can have some gratitude. I can benefit from someone else's gratitude. It starts changing the negativity in my life. Being in the moment. So, I guess another approach which is gaining increasing traction is mindfulness. Anyone here heard of mindfulness? No? A couple of us? So what does it mean to be mindful? Now, I guess, and I own this as part of my interpretation and application, is taqwa. When we say taqwa, what do we mean by taqwa? Sorry? Being conscious. Being conscious of what? Of our Creator. So there's something about being mindful of being in the presence of my Creator. I've got this packet of Maltesers here, and I apologize I wasn't able to bring the Maltesers. But again, something else for you to try. When you have a packet of Maltesers, how do you eat them? You just munch on them, get them down you. Yeah? When we have a meal, what do? Just munch on it, get it down us. But if you were to eat a Malteser in a mindful way, and maybe you can just do this as a mind experiment, don't munch it straight away. Let it balance on your tongue. Let the chocolate melt off. Wait until you get that crunchy bit. Resist the temptation to crunch into it. Let it melt. The value you get from that one Malteser that you eat mindfully will be much more than the whole packet that you just rush down. And so similarly with so many things we do in life, we're being robbed. Worry often robs us of our present because it's making us worry about the future. Or regret. I'm being robbed of my present because I'm worrying and I'm concerned about what happened in the past. Whereas the biggest blessing I have is my present. And if I can be more in the moment, recognizing that I'm under the watchful eye of my Creator, how much more could I make of this blessing? And I guess maybe just another invitation for you. The next time you make your salah, can you do it in a mindful way? Being aware of every single word that you're uttering. Being aware of who is it I'm praying in front of. I'm not telling you anything new. It's just an invitation to practice what you already know. And this practice can nurture patience, acceptance, and letting go of the hold that that thief from the past has, called regret. Letting go of that thief that the future worry has over me. Let me be in the present. Let me fulfill all the potential I have in this moment without being encumbered by the baggage of the past or the potential threat of the future that hasn't even happened. Next one. And I'll just move on now, just wrapping this section of what's helpful and unhelpful up with seeing how do we counter what's unhelpful. Now, if we go on to the first, next one. Injustice. There are bad things happening to me. There are bad things happening to my neighbor. There are bad things happening to the world. And actually, if I can engage myself, not in worrying and complaining about it, but doing something about it, actually I move on. That makes me mentally healthier. I'm less encumbered by the worry, less encumbered by the hopelessness, but more focused on what is it I can do. You know, in your phones you've started to build up this list of your blessings. How do those blessings link to what you can actually do? You know, if our purpose was to do ibadah, to pray, How are these individual blessings helping us to pray, to serve our Creator, to serve the Creator's creation? Problem solving. How many times do we have a problem that we just talk about? And where does talking get us? If you find yourself talking about the same thing once, twice, three, hang on, where's this going? If I'm going round in circles, then the only thing I know is that nothing's going to change. But if I can start taking whatever small step and consider yourselves and the blessings that you have being that pebble that you throw into the pond. Now the waves, you don't know where they're going to end. And you don't have control over where they're going to end. It's only the Creator. You do your bit. You do that little bit that you can do. Leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes if you don't have a particular structure or process to it, just Google problem solving structure. There's hundreds of different ways that can help you do it. The chances are you already know how to do it. Sometimes we just get a little bit lost with it. And a reminder can be helpful. Avoidance. When I'm concerned about something, particularly when I've got a more challenging scenario, if I avoid it, what happens? It's going to come back. I can turn away from it, but it's still there. Now, often what's there builds up in my mind, and it starts getting more power over me. If I give myself a chance to face it, I can more accurately assess what is it. And I can do something about it. I can take small steps. The more I avoid it, the more I deprive myself of the opportunity of proving or disproving it. I'm not saying we should run into every situation head on. Of course, we need to think about it. We need to think about our resources and support. But just be conscious of what is it I'm avoiding and why. How much of it is to do with my perception? How much of it is to do with that waswas, that whispers? You can't do it. Don't do it. It'll hurt. There'll be trouble. Don't let that be the master of your destiny. The biggest gift, or maybe not the biggest, but one of the key gifts we have, and I'll keep going back to this, is choice. This is what differentiates our theology from other theologies, is that we have choice. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything that's going to happen, but we don't. So let's make those choices, let's take those decisions, because not making a choice is a choice. And again, on the Day of Judgment, we'll be asked about every choice we made, including not making a choice. Now, it needs courage, but we are the beneficiaries of the best of examples of courage. So, do we want to just cry for the example and then walk out of the center, not putting it into practice, or are we going to use that as an inspiration to change our behavior? Self-criticism. Anyone here do self-criticism? Yeah. So we all do it. And actually there's a part of it that's useful. We hold ourselves accountable. But again, balance. If I spend all my time criticizing myself, the risk I might run is that I deprive myself of acknowledging the blessings that I have. Before I go to bed, it might be useful for me to think, how could I have improved myself today? But that's only one side of the story. How about acknowledging, actually, I achieved this today. Not with the intention of inflating my ego, but with the intention of having gratitude. For those of you who might know Michael Jordan, anyone heard of Michael Jordan? Yeah, world's greatest basketball star, and he got to that level because, of course, he was blessed with physical prowess, but he learned from his own games And he used to spend just as much, if not more time watching the games that he scored the most points in, so that he could be aware of what he was doing well, so he could build on it and be more consistent with it, rather than just focus on what I'm not doing well. We all have blessings, but do you think we're using the most of our blessings? There's always something more that we can be doing to build on our blessings. And focusing on our blessings is actually really helpful for our self-esteem. Whereas if we just focus on what we're not doing, on that criticism, if we don't love ourselves for what we've been created with, that has a very detrimental impact on our esteem, on our confidence, and on our ability to maximize on the potential that we've been blessed with. I talked last time about where we set the bar for ourselves, where our parents set the bar for us, the bar we set for our children. And when we set it at a high standard, that's great if they're equipped to achieve it. But if they're not equipped to achieve that, then we're setting them up for failure. Better to set the bar somewhere reasonable and build it up gradually. We're humans, we're not machines. Stress and tension, relaxation. Now there's different ways in which we relax, but when we don't relax, particularly when we're surrounded by anxiety, pressures, tensions, that starts having effect on our physique. Yeah? So I'm just going to do a quick relaxation with you. If you feel comfortable, close your eyes and just take a deep breath so that your stomach comes out. Don't worry, no one else is watching. And as you breathe in, remember that this is a blessing. That blessing, that every oxygen molecule coming into your lungs is a blessing. It's come with a purpose. Every creation has come with its purpose. And you've got millions of oxygen molecules coming in with a purpose to revitalize, to refresh, and to energize you. Now, because of time, that's all I'm going to get you to do. But there are hundreds of different ways to relax. Again, you probably know what helps to relax you. Are you giving yourself enough time to do that? Quick example of a devoted mother. She wants the best for her child. She puts in maximum effort with the homework, maximum effort with the packed lunches. School uniform is most pristine, fully ironed, everything. Grade A. Now, mum falls unwell. But she keeps pushing through. But she's starting to burn herself out. 3 days later, mum doesn't have a choice. She can't do anything. She's on the bed. She's got a fever because she didn't take any time to relax. She didn't take any time to value her body as being a creation that warrants love, that warrants a bit of attention, that warrants a bit of time. And that investment in the self, actually, and respecting your own body as a creation worthy of care and love, actually doesn't just pay off for you, but also pays off for the creation around you. And I would like to say, well, hey, we're in an Islamic center. This is obvious. This doesn't apply to us. The reality is, it does. And there are ways of coping that people use to manage their stress. Drugs, alcohol, food, gambling, pornography. Any of these things that, not just done, but being overdone, that might give that short-term relief, that short-term escape, but actually trap us further and further in. So as a preventative measure, just being aware of the slippery slope that this can take us down. I think we've talked a little bit about this. I'll just summarize it with one additional point, is whatever's stressing you out now, that negativity you have now, ask yourself, if I take a step back from it, how much is this going to matter in a week's time? You know that thing that my brother said to me? You know that rude remark that my daughter said? Okay, how much am I getting trapped in this moment? Can I take a step back and say, you know, why do I have to react so strongly to this right now? How much is it going to matter? Can I take a bigger picture? You know, why should I get so worried that they charge me an extra £3 on my mobile phone bill, when actually there's some serious issues out there? Why should I be worried that he wants me to speak in this language for this thing? Why should I be worried that she's asked me for this thing that I can't do right now? Of course, I'm not saying we shouldn't be bothered by those things, but keeping things in perspective. And that's why I've put that diagram of a helicopter. Let's just zoom out a bit, get into the habit of looking at the bigger picture. Have I thought about what's going on in Yemen? Have I thought about the other serious issues in the world and society? Or have I just become really narrowly focused on what may be petty, what may be significant issues, but do they really warrant that amount of attention? Is there a different way of looking at it? So, I think as I've tried to point out, that with all of these things, we all experience them. No matter who you are in life, everyone experiences some element of some of the difficulties I've talked about. It's where they go beyond a certain limit and they start affecting our functioning that we might want to say, you know what, I don't have to deal with this by myself. If I could, maybe I would have dealt with it by now. Is it just a matter of having more willpower and trying harder? Maybe it is. Let me try that. But we all have our limits. We don't have to be so arrogant to think, I can do everything by myself. And let me reach out to the blessings around me. That doesn't mean to say, open up my story to everyone who'll listen. We do it with sensitivity. We need to be careful about who we share with. But that doesn't mean that we don't share. Who's trusted, who's supportive, and sometimes just letting each other know that, you know, you can trust me. I will be your confidant. I will support you. Just to give people that confidence. And sometimes we might need to seek the help of medical professionals. And when it comes to a mental health difficulty, something that's really emotionally challenging and crippling for us, a GP is your gateway into finding which is the most relevant service for you. So, I think now maybe we just want to open it up a little bit to thinking about your ideas for a mentally healthy community, or any questions or comments you might have on what we've discussed today and indeed last week.
There is a mic for the sisters if you want to start off with the question. If not, we can start off with the notes.
Hi, I'm sorry, I didn't write it down because it's quite long, so I wanted to explain it to you. You see, I've got this friend who's diagnosed with depression right now, and it's gotten to a point where now it's months going on, and every single night, let's say, I'm proper speaking to her, I'm talking to her and everything, and I'm putting hours for her, and it affects her. She goes, I feel better and everything, and then tomorrow morning it's the same message. I feel really bad, I feel this and this, and it's gone to a point where I'm starting to lose myself, like my mental health is starting to affect me, and I'm starting to ignore her, but then I feel bad. So I'll go back and she's like, I feel so bad, you don't understand. And then when I message her, she gets happy again. So it's gone to a point where I really don't know what to do with her. It's come to a point where I'm starting to get tired easily, and I'm a psychology student, I'm final year and I'm stressed out already. So I feel bad though when I ignore her. Do you know what I mean? But I want to be there for her, but at the same time, I'm tired too. So I was wanted to know your advice about someone who's been diagnosed with depression, and her mental health and her health-wise is not good. So it's affected everything altogether. But I don't know what to do. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that situation. I can only just share my perspective on it. First of all, I think it's a great credit to you that you've been caring enough for a member of your community. And I think that sets a great example for the rest of us to at least try and be there. However, you're right, we need to look out for ourselves as well. That if someone's drowning and I'm going in there, but actually I'm struggling to swim as well, and I can't save that person, then we're both going to go down. Now, should I feel bad about that? Of course it's going to feel difficult. However, how do I use my faith as a Muslim? How do I make recourse and put my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Say, I've done what I can. On the Day of Judgment, and I think this is, the Day of Judgment can be every day for us. Asking ourselves, did I do what I could do? Was I responsible? And how responsible am I for someone? I'm not saying this is the case with the person, your friend or colleague, but sometimes we get into dynamics where people put a guilt trip on us, where we might empower them more by saying, I can't be the only one for you. Sometimes, many times in fact, our support can be enough, but there are times where, we have our own limits. And again, and this might sound a little bit paradoxical, but there's also an arrogance we need to be aware of about what is my limit and what's driving me. Is it a guilt? Is it a sense of taking too much responsibility? Yeah. So look after yourself in order to look after others. Recognize your own limits, and also think about what are the other blessings, what are the other options that can help, but also recognizing that there may be a limit to what anyone can do. Good point. So I think I mentioned this last week once as well, that one of the symptoms of a more severe experience of depression is thoughts of harming yourself, thoughts of even killing yourself. No one really wants to kill themselves in their right state of mind. But when things are so negative, when you just can't see a way out, a door opens. Now you might conceptualize it as a waswas, inviting you to a release, a way out. Now, we might be able to support someone to talk them through it. And again, having a sense of purpose. When I talked about Viktor Frankl's example last time, there are a lot of people in a concentration camp, they just couldn't see what was the point. It's better for me to die rather than to be abused and tortured every day. But what helped other people in a similar position was to be able to see what goes on beyond. If you can connect someone with what is beyond, what is their purpose, it might give them a ray of hope. However, there are limits to what we can do. And if we, despite trying that, someone's feeling that, we need to think about our responsibility. Because if we don't now reach out and try and get support, now where might you get support from? You might contact someone's GP, their family member, and in a more emergency, the ambulance or the police. But I'm really worried about this person who I think is at risk of taking their life. Now, what about confidentiality and trust? Confidentiality and trust is a very, very high priority, but never higher than the value of life. And in some situations, health services may need to section someone because they don't have the capacity to make the right decision about their own safety, or sometimes the safety of someone else. If I told you that Hussein, he's having a bad day. Him and his boss fell out, and he said he's going to kill his boss. What would you expect me to do? Oh, please don't get. I'm going to get him. I have to call the police. It becomes a responsibility. Yeah. Sorry. Good point. So what are my options? My options are now that I take the risk and let him kill someone, or I express my concerns and try and bring both parties to safety. Now, that might destroy our friendship, but if it saves another person's life, which one's more valuable? These are difficult decisions. Yeah? And we need to think about our ethics. And we have the best ethics. As Shias, we have the greatest examples. Next question. Yeah. And I think it's a very valid point, just for anyone who didn't hear. You know, as a community, what can we do? Like, how much do our communities offer this support? How much training do we have? Now, I think there are some excellent examples of ulama that I've worked with who have a very nuanced, in-depth understanding, but often they don't. My understanding is when you go to Hausa, that you're not always equipped with understanding what a mental health difficulty is. So I think just building on that, one of the next steps in terms of action planning for a more mentally healthy community is how we might work more in partnership. Why should we all say, oh, just the NHS has to do it, or just the alim has to do it? Why can't we work in partnership? Because the trust that often an alim in a community has is of the highest level, that you'd go and speak about anything to them rather than anyone else. So how can we leverage that? How can we equip our alims, even if they're not going to be therapists or counselors themselves, to be aware of picking up what are the different areas of challenge that someone might come to me with, and how can I point them in the right direction? And increasingly, and I mean, this is my kind of one of my passions, is that I go around to different universities training counselors and therapists and psychologists in understanding more about religion. You know, it is a very secularly dominated field, but that doesn't mean that people can't at least become more aware, be more sensitive, and not just pathologize faith, but actually think about how faith can be used as a strength. And inshallah, this movement is growing.
Sayyid Muhsin had a question.
You're right. A similar point was actually raised last week, and I mean, I can only offer my limited response. That part of the reason Hussein kind of invited me to kind of set up some of these workshops is just that we start becoming a little bit more aware of what's happening within ourselves and what kind of symptoms we might see in others. But a lot of people just mask it. You know, they don't want anyone else to know, and they do a very good job of it. So we can only deal with what's apparent to us. We can't look into someone's mind. What we can maybe be a bit more attuned to is just someone's like level of emotion. You know, are they flat? Particularly if you notice change. That's where we might have the most opportunity. That this person I'm just not seeing them at the centre as much as I used to. It might not be anything to do with mental health, but it's that concern. Now, how many of you were here last week? Yeah? And I bet there's someone you know who was here last week that isn't here this week. Now, what do? Oh, well, I went to a program today. It was okay. You know, inshallah, see you next week. But how many of you would pick up the phone, send a message or a text, say, Assalamu alaikum, I missed you today. How are you? Just gives us something about building our communities, having a bit more strength. A community is only as strong as the relationships within it. Doesn't matter how good the people up here are. It's about that a community is about how strong the relationships are within themselves. And that's not a responsibility. That's not something that can be taught or enforced. That's a responsibility we all take for ourselves. And particularly as Shias, are we sort of living out those messages, those hadith that talk about being able to put your hand in your brother's pocket or your sister's pocket? We come and we mourn the events of Karbala, but how much do we live the message that everyone who was there, the key feature they had was love for each other, love for their leader. The love we have for our leader, although we can't see him, he's here. And what he's looking for is the love we have for each other. So how much are we putting that into practice? Straight after this, I'm thinking, I'm hungry, I need to get a burger. Yeah? And of course, I need to attend to that need, but what about my relationships? I'm eating my burger to strengthen myself. What else am I doing to strengthen my relationships? So, sorry, it doesn't answer your question directly, but I've tried to answer it in a way that I can.
Ahsant. Just a question from the sisters. If you have shut yourself out because you don't know how to express the way you feel, what's the best way to communicate it to your family and people, friends?
I don't think there's necessarily a single answer to this, but one answer that I would put forward is first start off with your communication, with expressing yourself to your Creator, the ultimate confidant. When you sit on the prayer mat, do you just say your salah and finish? Or can you sit there and start having a conversation? Now, our Creator is going to understand us better than anything. The benefit of actually starting to express yourself to your Creator, saying it out loud, is it starts bringing you the language. You take one step towards your Creator, your Creator takes 10 steps towards you. That can give you strength in the first instance. Now, what if you're already doing that and it's still a struggle? So a couple of other ideas are to be able to talk about in the house how someone else respectable might have struggled with something. On YouTube, for example, there's a video you could sort of have a search on it called The Black Dog, which just starts talking about something like depression. Now, getting someone to watch it can do a lot of the talking for you, can help someone understand in a non-judgmental way, you know what, this is what it is. So you don't have to try and explain it all, particularly when it's so difficult to express it yourself. And I guess from that, maybe being able to share something about how you're struggling. Maybe sharing something about how you're trying to cope. I mean, from your own experiences, when someone just comes to you and whines, complain, it's not easy to listen to. But as a bit of advice, maybe if you're going to talk about your struggles, try and balance it so that the person trying to support you, the person you want to support you, feels like, there is something positive here. It's not all negative.
Ahsant. I think this is a good follow-up question. How can we reduce OCD in prayers and in tahara and so on and so forth?
So it is a pretty big question, but I guess if I can just do one last role play, because I'm conscious of the time. So does anyone here watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? The game show? Yeah. So you got the host, Chris Tarrant. So he asks the audience. Now he asks the contestant the question, and they have 4 options: A, B, C, and D. And the contestant says, "I think it's B, Chris." What does Chris say? Are you sure? So what he's done, he's planted a seed of doubt in the person's head. The contestant is like, yeah, I think it is B. Are you sure that you're sure it's B? I don't know. I think probably it's B. Do you want to phone a friend, or you don't seem too confident about it? Yeah, I don't know anymore. So what this is, I'm trying to demonstrate here, is that the seed of doubt, once planted, can be done for any of us. We all have doubts, it's natural. But the way you water that seed and get it to blow up into a huge monster of a plant that takes over your life, like OCD, is to ask questions, more and more questions. The more you see, the intention is good. I'll ask myself, am I doing it right? But the effect is to create more doubt. So I guess as one response to that question, there are broader responses to it, is just stop monitoring. How much am I doubting myself? Again, the wonderful thing is that our faith tells us how to deal with doubt. Giving yourself the benefit, as if my second or third rak'ah. Okay, there's a method for dealing with that. But it's dominated by giving yourself the benefit of the doubt.
Same person, second question. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to faint. However, I end up fainting due to fear, but not to a health issue. What can reduce this?
So, just based on that information, it sounds like something that might be related to panic, this kind of intense rush of symptoms of anxiety that make us fear that we're going to pass out. What can you do about it? So, again, people will have like 8 hours of therapy over a number of months to try and address it. So I can't hope to kind of do it justice. But I guess thinking about what's at the heart of something like that, this fear of fainting, is making sense about what's going on in my body. Now, when you're feeling anxious, what happens to your blood pressure? It goes up. When you faint, what happens to your blood pressure? It goes down. Yeah? It's only when it goes down to such a level that you fall unconscious. So just being aware, what's happening inside my body is actually all this anxiety is making me increase my blood pressure, which actually makes it really impossible for me to actually pass out. Now, the fear of passing out makes me try and cope. What's my coping strategy? If my coping strategies helps me challenge the fear, do it. But if it's like, I'm feeling faint, I better hold on to something before holding on to something is an example of giving in to the fear, not challenging the fear. This requires courage, it requires bravery, and often it requires support from someone else, which is where a therapist may come in to be helpful.
I think we can wrap it up now. In regards to these questions, I will sit with the doctor later and we'll post the answers online on the Karbala Project Facebook page, which will be shared by the Rasul A'zam page. So, you're good?
I'll try my best to respond to those. I guess I'd just like to wrap up with two key points, that the responsibility for trying to take our community forward lies in a partnership between what we as the individuals, the members using the facilities are doing, how we empower ourselves, and the leadership, the coordinators, the organizers. So inshallah, reflecting on your purpose, reflecting on that list of blessings that you've started, that I hope you really will continue to do, will give you some motivation to say, how can I contribute to making this a more mentally healthy community? How can I contribute to my own mental health, the mental health of people around me, and ultimately with the goal of being more spiritually fulfilled, fulfilling my potential that I've been blessed with, being able to answer those questions on the Day of Judgment, inshallah. I hope you'll join me in a short dua. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. From your names, we understand that you are the most beneficent, and we pray to you for the insight that we may see your blessings within us, that we may see your blessings around us, that we may recognize the trials and the tribulations that you expose us to, and take confidence that you've equipped us and equipped those around us to overcome those challenges. Ya Allah, we pray to you for the ability to put what we've learned into action, to be accountable for our amal, to be compassionate in the way that you are towards us, to ourselves and to each other, and pray for a stronger, a more fulfilled and a more peaceful community, inshallah.
Ahsan, thank you very much, Doctor, for this amazing two-part talk on mental health.